Ever get that feeling? Like you're looking up at the stars and it hits you just how much we don't know about where everything came from. Or like, what even is reality when you really think about it?
Yeah, totally. It's like this deep human need to make sense of things, to go beyond the everyday and grapple with the big picture.
Exactly. And sometimes you come across something that promises to tackle those huge questions head on, like really wrestle with them.
And that's kind of what we're doing today. You sent us some excerpts, and let me tell you this essay, Berashith, by Aleister Crowley, writing as a Pavananda. It's intense. It takes on existence itself and throws some pretty wild light on religion and reality.
It's not light reading, that's for sure. When I first saw it, I thought, whoa, this is going to be a challenge. But that's what makes it so interesting. Crowley doesn't shy away from the tough stuff.
Not at all. And for our listeners, our goal today is to pull out the most mind-blowing, insightful stuff from this essay, even if some of it gets a little...
Yeah.
Well, let's just say Crowley had his own unique way of looking at things.
Right. We're aiming for a clear overview and some surprising connections you might not expect.
Exactly. We won't get lost in the weeds, but we're going to grab the essence of Crowley's arguments, how he looks at the universe, his critiques of religion, and his alternative perspective, which, draws heavily on Kabul and this really specific idea of nothingness.
And I know Crowley can be a bit of a loaded name for some, and then throwing around terms like ontology, it can seem pretty intimidating.
I get it. But that's where we come in, right?
Yeah.
We're going to break it down, make it understandable, highlight what's really fascinating and unexpected. So where does Crowley even begin this whole massive project?
Yeah, good question.
Right off the bat, he's super clear about his goal. He says his theory of the universe is meant to explain the differences between Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity. And get this, he's not doing it through mystical experiences, but through logic. And specifically, he says, through math.
Through math. Okay, this is already intriguing.
Oh, it gets wilder. He even mentions he's not going into Islam right now, suggesting it could fit under one of his other three categories, nihilism, Advaitism, or Devaitism. But that's a whole other deep dive.
So he's like finding the mathematical underpinnings of these massive world religions. That's a pretty audacious starting point.
Definitely. And then one of the first things he tackles is infinity.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to God and our place in all of this.
Right, infinity, always a brain dender.
He goes right for the classic Christian idea of an infinite God. And he asks this really basic but huge question. How can an infinite God, everything, all-powerful, how can that actually coexist with humans and, well, even a figure like Satan having any kind of independent action?
Yeah, if God's truly infinite, it does seem like there's not much room for anything else to actually do anything.
He even uses this quote from William Whewell about how you can't physically stretch a rope perfectly straight horizontally no matter how hard you pull.
Yeah.
Like there's always going to be some sag.
So it's like even with infinite power, God, you can't have other truly separate forces, us, Satan, just hanging out next to it without some kind of fundamental contradiction.
Exactly. Crowley argues that an infinite God ends up diminishing the significance of human beings.
Yeah.
But then, if God's finite, it kind of undermines the reasons for worshiping them in Christianity.
Well, you lose that whole sense of ultimate power and authority.
Yeah. And he finds this whole Christian thing of three separate, real, opposed forces, God, humans, Satan, problematic. Like they're presented as equally real, not just aspects of one thing.
I see. So there's a logical issue there for him. And then he brings in the Hindu perspective, right, with Brahm and Maya.
Exactly. He brings up Brahm, the absolute infinite, kind of like the Gnostic pleroma, and then Maya, the illusion that makes the finite world seem real. He says there's this tension between ultimate reality, Brahm, and our experience, Maya, where Brahm is like defined by negating every quality it approaches nothingness under the title of Alice, the all.
Whoa, that's a lot to unpack. So it's like ultimate reality is so beyond our categories, it's almost defined by what it's not.
Right. He even brings up Max Miller's work on nirvana here.
Yeah.
And he points out that Buddhism kind of stays silent on these specific questions about ultimate reality.
Interesting. So Hinduism tries to bridge the infinite and our experience with illusion. But I feel like Crowley's going to find some problems with that, too.
Oh, he does. He says, yeah, Hinduism struggles with explaining Maya, the source of suffering. But at least they're trying to deal with suffering, which is a real human experience, right?
Yeah, you got to count for that.
He contrasts this with Christianity, which, while it rejects the Manichaean idea of Satan as like equally powerful evil, it hasn't really dealt with the implications of how our soul is supposed to be distinct from an infinite God.
So, like, where's the boundary? If God's infinite, what even are we?
Right. Though he does say some thinkers, like Hermes Trismegistus, Iamblichus, Jacob Boehm, some Vedantists, they did kind of grapple with this.
So some folks were onto it, but taking that infinite God idea seriously, it seems to shrink human agency, maybe even our soul's separate existence. And Crowley takes it even further, right? Like, if we don't have real independent power, the whole personal God idea kind of falls apart.
You got it. He says, if humans aren't truly independent forces, that personal God of Christianity pretty much disappears. It becomes more like the impersonal Atman, the Pleroma, or the Kabbalistic Ein Sof, all infinite in every way. And he emphasizes, if you deny one human agency, you're back to Dvaitism, dualism, which he's already said is a problem.
So no dualism either. He spends a good chunk of time critiquing Advaitism, too, that non-dualism idea, especially in Hinduism. What's his main beef there?
He actually kind of sympathizes with this guy, Reverend Henry Mansell. Mansell struggled with the logic of Advaitism, especially with an infinite God and space. He ended up saying reason's just not equipped to deal with this stuff, got to rely on faith.
Ah, the old reason fails, faith takes over argument.
Right. Crowley and this philosopher Paul Dawson, they see faith as believing without enough evidence, not very satisfying intellectually.
Yeah, like when logic hits a wall with infinity, just have faith. Not very convincing for Crowley.
Nope. And he has practical problems with it, too. If only the infinite self exists, what's the point of our lives, our actions, our egos? Why bother with all this imperfection if there's this perfect infinite reality? He basically says the Vedantist position is like, I'm an illusion, the true I is infinite. And then he throws in this kind of sarcastic line about how this makes things like karma and rebirth operate nowhere in nothing.
Uh-huh. It's like if everything's an illusion, where are those rules even playing out?
Exactly. Crowley says in pure Advaitism, there's no room for worship or morality. Trying to squeeze those in is just confusion of thought. He even says something like, the grinning mouths of the Vedantist guns keep the fort of ethics. Like, you need that dualistic good versus bad to have ethics at all.
Whoa, that's a powerful image. So he's saying dualism might be flawed, but it at least gives us a basis for morality. And the fact that everyone's trying so hard to justify Advaitism kind of proves his point, he thinks.
Yeah, he's like, all that effort speaks volumes.
Yeah.
So having kind of taken down these existing frameworks, he brings in his alternative. And this is where we get to the absoluteness of the Kabbalistic zero.
Okay, this sounds like a core idea for him.
Absolutely. He's challenging centuries of assumptions, going back to basics. His big claim is this absoluteness of the Kabbalistic zero. And he makes sure to say, this ain't your regular math zero. That zero, he says, is just absence of extension in any category.
Okay, so like 0 apples is just no apples in the category of apple.
Exactly. He uses this funny example. No cat has 2 tails.
Yeah.
He's saying that doesn't mean absence of cat possesses 2 tails. It means within the category of things with 2 tails, there's no cat example. So even math 0 works with categories.
I'm following. So at math 0 is still within a system where categories exist. But the Kabbalistic zero is something totally different, like before categories even existed.
Exactly. He defines this nothingness as something you can't even make positive statements about. You can't say nothingness is colorless, because that's still giving it a property.
It's like truly nothing, no qualities whatsoever.
Right. And then he brings in these categories, time, space, being, heaviness, whatever. He uses this analogy of a guy, X, whose formula is like xt plus s plus b plus h, if he's got those 5 categories. Time, space, being, heaviness, having a heart. If he loses those, the formula changes. If he loses all of them, it becomes exagrees, which equals 1.
And that exagrees equals 1. That's where he links it back to Advaitism, right? The individual self merging into the one.
Bingo. He sees this as reflecting that Advaitist idea of the individual as future personality is gone, everything's stripped away. You merge into this impersonal unity, like the Pleroma, Parabrahma, or the Allah of those Unitarian Muslims.
Yeah.
But Crowley wants to go even further back to the very origin.
Not just unity, but the source of it all.
Right. And for him, that's this absolute zero. Not just the math zero, but this Kabbalistic zero. And that brings us to the cosmic egg arising from zero era.
Okay, we're doing math on nothingness now. This is where things get really wild.
It does. So he's saying, if there was truly zero before the beginning, it couldn't have had any extension in any category because categories didn't exist yet. Even math zero needs categories. So zero era is nothingness that's not even defined by the absence of anything.
It's like nothingness squared, even more nothing than just nothing.
Yeah, it's mind-bending. And he says initially zero era is meaningless to us, then boom, the great inversion.
The great inversion. Lay it on me.
Okay, get ready for this. He does this symbolic math manipulation of 0, turning it into n times infinity. And through a bunch of logic steps, he gets some unknown finite number extended in an unknown number of categories. Basically, he's saying, through this great inversion, going from absolute nothingness to finitude. That's where the cosmos comes from, purely by chance.
So, like, the universe popped out of nothingness kind of by accident.
That's Crowley's argument. And he says, you can't even say 0 degrees existed or didn't exist before this because existence wasn't even a concept yet. He concludes, 0 is finite, our universe is finite, our categories are finite, and infinite space is a contradiction. That infinite God idea, gone. As impossible as the square root of Nexus 1.
So he's not just saying it's philosophically tricky, but mathematically wrong. That's a bold move. Now, I can imagine someone saying, hold on, our whole number system is just made up. How does he deal with that?
He totally anticipates that. He uses this example, counting 3 apples as 3, or as 503, if we decide to call it that. Sure, the symbols are arbitrary, but you're still counting something, right? That act of consciousness, that's what matters. So the math symbols might be human, but the underlying ideas aren't just random.
The label changes, but the core concept stays the same. Now, he also brings up a logical parallel to this whole great inversion thing.
Yeah, he does this analogy, saying some books are on the table, and then changing it to absence of book is not on the table, like a shift in perspective, not just words. Then he does this thing with pigs, showing how reversing that logic can tell you something new. He's trying to show how this 0 degree to universe idea has a kind of logical echo. And he also criticizes Advaita for, like, treating a some are statement as an all are statement, messing up the logic.
Okay, so he's linking this mathematical universe from nothingness to how we think logically, and then he does this proof by exclusion thing, right?
He does. He says, look, I've shown how dualism and non-dualism are both flawed. And he claims most metaphysicians kind of know this deep down, with how much they try to fix those systems. So his theory, being the only one left, must be true, even if it sounds crazy at first.
Classic process of elimination. And then the big question, if 0A made the universe, what caused that?
Crowley's answer is blunt. Nothing caused it. There couldn't be a cause, because if Oloyuri's was subject to causality, nothing could happen. So the very lack of categories, including causality, is what allowed the universe to just appear.
It's like the absence of a cause is the cause. I kind of see the paradox there. Now, he's painted this picture of a finite universe from nothingness. What about our experience in this universe? Suffering, our sense of self.
He's clear. We are finite beings in a finite universe, finite time, space, causality. But he gets that the illusions that Vedas talk about, like our individual self, they feel real to us. He even agrees with Schopenhauer and the Buddha. The suffering's just part of this finite existence. Things clash, everything changes, suffering's baked in.
So even if it all came from and might go back to nothingness, our experience as individuals feeling joy and sorrow, it's real in this setup.
Yeah.
And what about the universe going back to 0 degrees? Possible.
He thinks it's super unlikely. First, there's no inherent reason for it to go back. And more importantly, causality exists now. It's like this massive force of inertia. Once it's going, reversing it is almost impossible.
Makes sense. Once the cause and effect train starts rolling, good luck stopping it. So where does that leave free will, morality, religion, all that stuff?
He gets into all of it. On free will, he suggests causality might not be totally airtight. Maybe there's a tiny bit of wiggle room for real choice. But even if it's an illusion, like Herbert Spencer said, we still got to act, right? And then he says, morals, religion. They're methods we've come up with to deal with this finite universe, some better than others.
So it's not about worshiping a god, but about navigating this reality, maybe even finding a way out.
Totally. He also rejects this whole infinite intelligence running the show. Instead, it's the law of inertia. Things just keep doing what they're doing or take the path of least resistance. He says that explains evolution, the rise and fall of species, all that. And he brings up the whole love versus power problem. If God's got both infinitely, why is there suffering?
So no benevolent puppet master. It's more like the universe is running on autopilot. And where do morality and religion fit in again?
He says those rules and precepts, they help control chaos, both in nature and society. They create stability, which we need to learn and investigate, and ultimately to maybe figure out how to control this prison of the finite universe, to break free. He seems to see mystical practices as for the folks who are really pushing those boundaries.
So morality and religion, tools for order, and maybe even for escape. Now, what about specific practices? Yoga, meditation, how do those play into reaching nirvana in his system?
He makes this distinction between Hindu and Buddhist approaches to nirvana, extinction. He says Hindus create this illusory, infinite, impersonal personality, like a universal self, to get rid of their own limitations. Buddhists, though, they go straight for extinction of individual existence. He thinks the Hindu way is ultimately an illusion, but maybe useful at the start. He kind of accepts the yogi claim that nirvikalpa samadhi, this super deep meditation state, is like nirvana, but not moksha, the Hindu liberation idea.
So Hindus kind of create a fake infinity to work with. Buddhists go direct.
Exactly. He says the Buddhist path is all about focusing the mind, fighting causality, stopping future consequences from happening. Different from what he calls the exoteric Christians and Hindus who rely on external stuff and are attached to individual existence. Esoteric Christian Hindu paths are like a middle ground uniting with the absolute, which he thinks destroys the personality. Could be dangerous if you're seeking power, but the logic kind of self-corrects, he thinks.
Interesting. It does seem like he leans towards the Buddhist path as most aligned with his whole nothingness framework. He even mentions personally taking refuge in the triple gem of Buddhism.
He does. He says, after thinking it through, he's deliberately choosing refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And after that, he says, boom, his theory reconciles all these philosophical opposites. Noumenon and phenomenon, unity and multiplicity, all solved. The only question left is how best to reach nirvana, which, he makes super clear, is the end of everything. Existence, knowledge, feeling, all gone.
Extinction. Full stop. That's a pretty heavy concept, for sure.
It's radical. He addresses the criticism that Buddha is leading people to annihilation, saying, well, from our current thinking, yeah, extinction is the end of everything we know. What's beyond that? Can't even talk about it. He also says, now that there's no infinite being, all these different spiritual practices that seemed contradictory before, they can coexist. They're just different tools in this finite reality. Even fits with Kabbalah, its non-infinite God, and those spiritual hierarchies.
So no more infinite constraint, more possibilities open up. And of course, being Crowley, he has to bring in ceremonial magic too, right?
Oh yeah, wouldn't be Crowley without it. But he presents it in a specific way. He says it's about achieving one-pointedness of mind, that intense focus you need for deep meditation to eventually reach nirvana. Advanced yogis might not need it anymore, but for others, it's like a mental gym.
Magic as mental training, interesting.
He explains, true magic's about constantly directing your actions, words, and thoughts towards one goal. It builds up to this huge surge of will. He even mentions Solomon, the Abramelin system, all about mastering these forces to prepare you to stop thinking altogether.
So it's not about casting spells, but about discipline and control. And he also makes that connection between Eastern thought and some Western ideas, like Berkeley, right?
He does. He brings up Berkeley's idealism, the universe existing because a mind perceives it. Compares it to the Eastern idea that the universe comes from the thinker's thought. Even mentions Thomas Huxley saying something similar. And finally, he lays out the 8 limbs of yoga, that whole system of body, mind, and spirit control leading up to rapture, ecstasy. He says only after mastering that can you really wipe out the causes of continued existence and reach nirvana. And the Arhat, the advanced practitioner, they're already anticipating nirvana, even while living bathed in this blissful state.
Wow. So Crowley takes us on this huge journey, critiques religion, throws in zero agrees and the great inversion, ends up with a Buddhist-flavored nirvana, even throws in some magic along the way. A lot to digest.
It's a lot, for sure. But some key things stand out. Him questioning infinity, his idea of nothingness as the zero, reconciling religions with infinitude, and seeing practices as tools for this specific liberation extinction.
Really shifts your perspective. Now, for you listening, what does infinity even mean to you? And how does that shape how you see yourself in reality? If the goal is extinction, like Crowley says through this Buddhist lens, how does that change the value we put on our experiences and our efforts in life?
Those are the big questions Crowley leaves us with. And if any of this sparked your curiosity, I definitely recommend checking out Berashith itself or diving into some of these related philosophies. It's a rabbit hole worth exploring.
Couldn't agree more. This deep dive into Berashith has been a wild ride, but super rewarding. Shows how thinking outside the box, even with someone as out there as Crowley, can lead to some truly fascinating ideas.
And sometimes, those are the ideas that make us really question what we think we know.
Exactly. And isn't that what it's all about?